like, this is me shouting from the rooftops that you do need to read this one. This is the type of thing that we don't hear about because it makes America look not great because we hired Nazis. Everything starts to make more sense once we know the twist. In this book, hello, good morning friends, welcome back to another video. It is my April wrap-up, and April showers are supposed to bring May flowers, but it's May 2nd today, the day that I'm filming this, and it's pretty nasty outside still. So unfortunately we don't have the bookshelves behind me. The lighting over there is just not gonna work out. So here we are at the couch. You guys know how this works if you've watched me since January 2025. I used to do the 5-star rating system. I think it's honestly pretty jacked up. So what I've been doing since January is just using 4 categories. So the great, the good, the okay, and the bad. And then we also have the D and F category. So that is how I'm gonna move through things. First up, unfortunately, is the DNF. We did have one this month, and it's not because it wasn't well written, because it was well written, but I was not in the mood for it. I got a couple of stories in. This was a short story collection called Guatemalan Rhapsody. It's new, it just came out this year, and this was going to be my read for Guatemala for my Reading Around the World challenge. Just got a couple of stories in and it just wasn't doing it for me. It has to be kind of speculative in order for me to really commit to a short story collection. This one is described in the synopsis as a kaleidoscopic portrait of an ever-changing country. And so it sounded like exactly what I'm looking for when I'm looking for one of my challenge books. Each story followed like a different group of characters. Some of them were immigrants, some of them were natives, and it kind of explores Guatemala, but also like the diaspora. So from what little I read, it seems to be kind of a rumination on family, community, violence, also love, and then Guatemalan culture, of course. I only got like 3 stories in, I think, so I did not get very far. What I was kind of picking up on from the 3 that I did read, it was sort of asking how much control we really have over our lives, how much of our fate is determined by external factors. I do think listening to this one in light of everything that's happening in America right now might hit some people pretty hard. Again, I only DNF'd because I was not in the mood for that particular type of story at that time. It was to no fault of the writer, for sure. All right, now let's get into the great. The great, the great, the great. Right here on top, you know what it is. If you watched my reading vlog, this is Augustina Bazterrica's new book, The Unworthy. Okay, so she came out with Tender as the Flesh. I don't even know when, however many years ago. It was buzzy. It's always been one of those buzzy books online. So I read it and was obsessed and totally understood the hype. This one I don't think has been getting quite as much buzz. I've seen a couple of interviews with her online. You know, they were obviously promoting it. She is with like a traditional publisher. I haven't really seen enough people freaking out about this, so I need to like, this is me shouting from the rooftops that you do need to read this one. It's so good. It takes place at the end of the world. Basically, there's been some sort of nuclear event, and the few people remaining have found sanctuary at this convent, and it is run by a mysterious man. We literally don't ever even get his name. He is just sort of the mysterious, sort of priestly kind of figure running the place from the shadows. And then we have one of the nuns. She is the superior sister, and she doesn't dress in the same garb as all of the Unworthy and the other women do. She dresses like military style, like she's in combat boots, she gets to wear pants, and she has a whip by her side. So this convent is an Eden for these women, where there is a very strict hierarchy. When I was doing my reading vlog, I literally had to draw, I'll see if I can find it. I had to draw in my notebook where I was taking notes, like who was above who and like who is equal to who, because she does go pretty deep in with all of the different like factions almost, and it's pretty disturbing. There is body horror in here for sure. So we're following an unnamed female main character who survived sort of a Lord of the Flies style upbringing. There is a little bit of cannibalism in here. She had to actually escape cannibalistic adults when she was out in the world. And if you don't know, if you haven't read Tender as the Flesh, it is about cannibalism. So she can't quite get away from the cannibalism. When they bring you in and they kind of, like how cults do, and they kind of strip you of your former identity, she now has been brainwashed into believing that she really wants to be one of the enlightened. And the enlightened are out of sight. They're behind this black door. Sometimes she hears screams from behind this door, and they have these prophetic visions, and they are part of the priest's inner circle. So all of the unworthy and all of the people, even beneath the unworthy, want to be enlightened, or they think they want to be enlightened. So we watch as she sort of uncovers a very big secret that's happening in the convent, and we learn this through her. This book is essentially supposed to be her diary. It's like we're reading her diary. And there is something so like darkly magical about her prose. It's never too flowery, but it's never too like quick. It's like her sentences, they're short and they're simple, but there's like so much teeming beneath the surface, you know? I love dichotomy. There's a very palpable gap between the sort of strict monastic way of life at the convent and like the violence and the envy and the fear that's happening just behind people's eyes. It's very much Handmaid's Tale vibes. If you like The Handmaid's Tale, this is like, these should be read almost in conversation with one another. So the themes in here were like information and communication, and how it's kind of scary actually, because like, especially with the mainstream media and stuff nowadays, people waking up to the fact that like the mainstream media is essentially a company, like they have an owner. News network is giving you a very particular one-sided story. They're not giving you the full picture. It's all about the way that information is kind of disseminated and communicated. So I feel like it's a really good kind of allegory for just like our modern, the way that we consume media and the way that we receive information nowadays. Kind of answering the question like, what have you seen with your own eyes that directly contradicts something that the enlightened has told you? Almost in that sense, then you could compare it to 1984 maybe a little bit. It very much also feels like a cautionary tale against AI, because it's very briefly mentioned like the grid had to be shut down right before like the worst of it, because they were trying to prevent the spread of AI's power, its hunger to dominate its creator. And then we have to just completely start over from scratch. And it's a disturbing beginning. And who better to bring it to you than Augustina Bazterrica? I love her so much. All right, next is the Chonker. This is the nonfiction for the month. The nonfiction is the nonfiction. This is by Annie Jacobson. She has written so much. She's a journalist. She's been around for a while. She's got a book on Area 51 that I want to read. She's got a book on like remote viewing and like how the CIA used remote viewers to find things. I'm not totally sure. Anyway, this is Operation Paperclip, the secret intelligence program that brought Nazi scientists to America. So this is one of those books that's really informing you about things that you should have learned in school, but because like the American education system is so curated, shall we say, this is the type of thing that we don't hear about, because it makes America look not great, because we hired Nazis to help us build NASA. That's what this book is about. There are a lot of names and dates. I think in the back she's got a list of principal characters, and there are 88 people. I do recommend taking notes, probably more than just little tabbies. I should have had like my actual notebook out with me. There's an insert, helps you put names to faces. We are post World War II, and many German scientists who should have been tried for war crimes because they were experimenting on humans who were imprisoned in the concentration camps. They were creating weapons, whether it was like chemical compounds or like literal rockets. And they were instead hired by the United States to help us build up NASA. The idea being that like, well, if we don't hire them, Russia will. So like we have to hire them because we don't want their knowledge to go to the Russians. We do end up finding out in here that about 1/3 of them who were literally inmates because they were tried at Nuremberg, they were freed. So they were found guilty at the Nuremberg trials, and then they were let loose in America. Not let loose, but they were freed in order to work for NASA. It's one of those books you read and it's like there's so much cognitive dissonance by like from what you learned in school and how I think of NASA. It's like actually kind of difficult to comprehend, but I mean it's a legitimate thing. Like she used declassified documents, dossiers that, you know, were kind of hidden from the public before. She filed a lot of the like Freedom of Information Act. She had a lot of requests for those. Some things they allowed her to see. Some things were, her requests were accepted. Some of them were denied. Some of them are still pending. And this came out in 2013, 2014. There are still facts that we don't know because they refuse to tell us. Anyway, if you're like me, even just like last year, I would not have read a book like this. Like, okay, I need to start actually educating myself. I went to school. I didn't really learn much. You know what I mean? I'm kind of taking it upon myself now as an adult to learn the truth about things. And Annie Jacobsen is a great resource. If this book this kind of thing usually typically intimidates you or it sounds boring or whatever, I promise like it is worth putting in the time because you are educating yourself in a way that your probably public education failed to do. I do want to start reading more about the CIA. Thank you for, somebody recommended The Devil's Chessboard to me, which I did thrift on eBay. I have a copy of that. The CIA is like the girl in high school who was like always involved in everybody's drama. And you always kind of wondered like how she knew about everything that was going on. And then you realized it was because like she was starting the drama. That's the CIA. All right, we are moving into the good category now. And the first one up is an audiobook that I read. So this was The Popol Vuh, I think I'm saying it right, by Michael Bezet. This was the one that I ended up finishing for my Reading Around the World Challenge for Guatemala. So this is like a recreation of the Mayan creation stories, but in verse. The author essentially put it into the form of an epic poem, which I thought was really cool. I'm like super impressed by any translation in general, but his writing is excellent, like much less turning something into an epic poem. The author narrates the audiobook, who better? I will say he does it like all in one go, like it wasn't edited, so there's like a lot of mistakes, but his voice is so nice. He has such like one of those like deep male voices that you could just like listen to all day. He chose a poetic structure of 3 and 4 beat lines. He talks about this in, I can't remember if it's the introduction or maybe at the end where he's kind of explaining like his process. So it is a story of a flood. It's the story of the creation of man. There's an original family with grandparents and parents and hero twins. There's 2 twin boys and they're kind of our main characters. And then there's the early history of the Quiche Mayans. I think I'm saying it right. All the way up to the Spanish conquest. So he accomplishes a lot, honestly, in 4 hours. I was impressed. So if you like reading about cultural origin stories, if you like books like the Epic of Gilgamesh, I remember reading that one in like a World Lit class that I took in college. If you like mythology, then you'll probably enjoy this one. The way that, you know, the language that he uses and the images and the descriptions. And I like that we actually have like strong characters who are propelling the story forward, and there is like a plot that you can follow. But then there are like the crazy like metaphorical descriptions of nature and then like other realms and all these other characters. So I know nothing about epic poetry. I know nothing about the process of translation, but I was very impressed with how smoothly this read. And then there was an introduction and then sort of a reflection at the end, and I loved that he kind of, you know, bookended the actual poem with his thoughts to give us context. So I love that one. That was The Popol Vuh. Next up in the good category was another Reading Around the World challenge. This one was for El Salvador. And this was a like dual Spanish and English book, which I thought is so cool. So it has the Spanish on the left and the English on the right. But this is Stories and Poems of a Class Struggle by Roque Dalton. I don't know if I'm saying his first name right. I did not look up how to pronounce it before this video. So the reason why this isn't in the great category, I think, is just a me problem. It's me not having enough knowledge and background information on like the socio-political climate of El Salvador in the 70s. But he did help me understand how much he and many others like him hated capitalism, hated it. The vitriol that he uses to talk about capitalism. I mean, it's just like the most evil thing in the world. So it's interesting for me, and this is kind of the whole reason for why I'm doing this challenge in the first place, is to kind of like take my mindset out of like a very Western, you know, kind of boxy Western mindset and try to think about things a little bit differently. And obviously here in America, we love capitalism. She's great. She's wonderful. She is the best thing ever. The fact that this just completely eviscerates capitalism is kind of hilarious. It's very much one of those situations where there's like cognitive dissonance happening. I'm like, no, you're wrong. What do you mean? Like what? But he puts, forth some arguments that unfortunately aren't super like well explained because he's writing in the form of poems and they're super short. And so he doesn't have a lot of time. Like he literally doesn't have enough word count to explain a lot of his reasoning, but I enjoyed this nonetheless. And he joined the Salvador Communist Party and is very much known as a revolutionary poet. He is known for changing the landscape of Central American poetry. And he was actually eventually assassinated by his own political faction. That all comes up in the, I think is it in the introduction? Yes. There's a couple of essays in the front that kind of give you some cultural context, which is very, very helpful. I recommend, don't ever skip those. So I do recommend that one if you are particularly interested in El Salvador or reading something that's very anti-capitalist. So that was Stories and Poems. You say hi real quick? Say I'm whining and meowing because I want to go outside, but mommy's doing this, so I have to wait and be patient. Okay? All right, we are in the home stretch. We are in the okay category now, and I have 2 Palahniuks to talk about. And I have now officially completed all of Palahniuk's work. I know that a lot of you were quite upset at me I read every book by Chuck Palahniuk video because there were a few that I did DNF. These were 2 of the 4, I think, that I DNF'd. So I did finish them. First we have Rant. This is a biography, a posthumous biography of our titular character, Rant Casey. And he is a demolition derby guy. This is one of those books told exclusively in dialogue. So it's told interview style. I really did not like this the first time that I tried this a couple of years ago. And for whatever reason this time around, I was able to stick with it. One of the pitfalls of this kind of structure is that you end up with people not talking naturally. You end up with really strange dialogue at times because he's still trying to use descriptive language, but people just don't talk like that. We don't talk like we write. And so there were some weird things like that, but overall he is telling a fairly interesting story. It's like a posthumous memoir of Rant by people in his inner circle, in his small town. There's a lot of suggestions in the first 50 pages or so of him being essentially a super spreader of rabies. So that's how we start. There are rumors going around town that he might be a serial killer. It's got an interesting start to it. So over the course of about 300 pages, we uncover how he died, what happened to his body, and a lot more, because there is a plot twist, and Palahniuk loves a good twist. Ever since Fight Club, that's kind of the twist that made him famous, if you will. But this twist was so, in Fight Club, it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Everything links together. Everything starts to make more sense once we know the twist. In this book, it was just so out of left field, very unexpected. It feels like he's trying to chase the high of Fight Club. He's trying to achieve the same shock value. And he even mentions Fight Club one time. He's very cheeky. It gets a little bit messy. So I'm not going to tell you what the twist is, but it happens in the last quarter of the book. For a lot of it, so for about 75% of it, there's a lot that doesn't make sense, and you're just holding on, hoping that it will eventually make sense. And it does eventually, sort of. A little crumb that I'm going to give you is that it has to do with time. So if you don't like twists that have to do with time, you're going to hate literally your entire reading experience with this one. There were a couple of chapters where I very much was just okay, I'm riding the wave. It's like when you're in the ocean and you can't do anything and you're against the current, so you're I'm just gonna float. That's what I was doing for a lot of this. I do have to give him credit for being himself. For writing absolutely wacky characters and stories and not necessarily caring how they are perceived or how it kind of reflects on him as an author. And we have enough kind of questions that he sets up that we need answered to keep us reading. So I will say when the twist is revealed, it requires so much of an explanation from him and like tying up of loose ends that by like the 75% mark, they did feel a little bit slow and repetitive because there's so many POV characters in this. 56. That is insane. It's almost like he's mocking, I mean, he writes satire, so we can just assume that it's satire. It's like he's mocking the like multiple perspective books because he has 56 of them. Ultimately for me, the twist was not worth the time that I spent reading 300 plus pages, which is why this is in the okay category. For me, a book like Fight Club pays off because it's such a good twist. And you know, the circle of characters and the plot is kept a little bit tighter. And I think Palahniuk falls into this kind of pitfall with his later novels. This isn't even one of his later novels though, because this was 2007. Yeah, he runs into this issue in his later novels where he's like trying to fill an entire town with characters, 56 to be exact, and giving us every POV under the sun is just not necessary. All right, last and honestly kind of least, I couldn't decide whether or not to put this one in the okay or the bad category, so I just went ahead and left it in the okay category. It's not horrible, so not his best. This is The Invention of Sound. I definitely still understand why I DNF'd this one originally years ago whenever it came out. The twist in this one, because again, he's a big fan of twists, is just so convoluted. Like this one I was not following very closely at all. I did end up having to go on Reddit when I was done with it and be like, what are people saying about this? Like what actually happened? Like, was I actually following what was going on? We're following a man named Gates Foster, and he lost his daughter 15 years prior to the opening of the book, and he believes that she was trafficked. And so he spends his time watching the most disturbing videos online of children being exploited to try to find her or potentially her kidnapper in order to bring her to justice. The very slim possibility that like he's gonna find her in one of these videos and be able to kind of like Liam Neeson her like, you know, Taken style and save her. That's kind of like literally it's the only thing keeping him going. He is just so desperate to find her. He actually ends up hiring an escort that looks a lot like what she would look like. Using like age progression software, he finds like a match of somebody who looks very similar to what she would look like now, and provides her with like a full history of his daughter's life so that he can like have a believable conversation with her. So, you know, he's a little bit unhinged. He's a little bit disturbed, you could say. And then we're also following Mitzi. So thankfully we do have a much tighter cast of characters in this. There are not 56 characters, thank goodness. And Mitzi is a sound engineer, and she specializes in screams. So her mission is to record the perfect scream and then sell it to the highest Hollywood bidder. And she tortures people to do this. So she is a sadist. We do eventually discover a connection between Mitzi and Gates. So that's kind of like where the twist comes in, is like their stories eventually converging. And the twist, like I said kind of at the beginning, it's so subtle and it gets so convoluted that I wasn't really totally sure. You can kind of tell I didn't have as many tabs in this one. I feel like if you think too logically about it, you're gonna start to see through the plot holes. I think ultimately the sort of like point of this one is that he's trying to comment on the very dark underbelly of Hollywood and how it exploits children, like child actors, and sometimes children who are not actors. The general consensus, at least on Reddit, I didn't check Goodreads, I didn't check Storygraph, but on Reddit at least, readers were very dissatisfied with this one. They felt like the ending was rushed, and the twist, again, kind of like with Rant, was a little bit like random. And anyway, I have to agree with them. So this was certainly not my favorite. If I was gonna give this one a star rating, it would probably be like a 2.5. So was not particularly impressed with The Invention of Sound. And then luckily I had none in the bad category, so we don't have to talk about any straight up bad books. If you had any books that you thought were great or bad, let me know. Leave them in the comments. You guys know I'm always looking for new books to put on my TBR. Are you finally gonna help me now? He's so ready to go outside. He's so done with me. Okay, so that was my April wrap up. Say goodbye, Caramel. Say bye. You say bye. Say see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.